Hey, welcome. Lovely to see you. Let's let people in. Oh. So welcome. Just keeping an eye and letting people in as well. So, yeah, how lovely to come together like this. Probably Sunday morning for many of you, Sunday evening for me here in France. So, and as people are joining, let's just take a minute to settle and sit and arrive together. So wherever we are, just feeling into however we can into our body, into the ground, into the space around our body that is welcoming us. And into the community or Sangha as we're coming together here. And just allowing ourselves a moment of quiet, of listening, of arrival, of connection, however that is for each one of us. Also look around and see all the other lovely faces here. Welcome to any of you who I don't know. I'm Sumedha. I'm one of the teachers with Sacred Mountain Sangha, and I have to admit this is one of my favourite sessions. It's such a lovely coming together of people. So thank you for being here. And the sessions usually unfold, so we have like some time for chanting and a guided meditation and then some reflections, which that'll take us to the hour. So we'll have an hour for that, and then after the hour, if you want to stay, there'll be a time for discussion or questions. So I'm still letting people in, so apologies. So let's start with the chanting. So I'll put the chanting booklet in the chat there. And I really, I think it's can be a very precious thing to just on a regular basis recollect the refuges and the precepts, and particularly at this time where it feels like ethically there's a lot happening that is very unsound. There can be something very deeply aligning around recommitting ourselves to the precepts and a sense of refuge as we find that within ourselves. So this is not dogmatic. The precepts are just reflections to remind us of key areas to look into our actions of body, speech, and mind. So that's on page 3 of the chanting booklet, which I'll put again in the chat. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchami. Dhammaṃ saranang gacchami. Sanghaṃ saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intentionally taking life. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sumichachara veramani
sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
I undertake the training to refrain from misusing some harsh and meaningless. Surameraya majjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intoxication which leads to carelessness. Then we can go to the qualities of the Triple Gem on page 4 that we'll chant in Pali. And it's really good to come back and contemplate the meaning of the chant also, if that speaks to you. So Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho bija charana sampano sugato lokavidu anutaro purisa dhamma sarati sata deva manusanam Buddho bhagavati sawakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko panayiko pachatang veditabo vinyuhiti supatipano bhagavato sawakasango ujjupatipano bhagavato sawakasango nyayapatipano bhagavato sawakasango Samicipatipano bhagavato sawakasango yadidam chatari purisayugania tapurisa pugala esa bhagavato sawakasango ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anutarang punyaketam lokasati. And then I'd like to do a couple of the more teaching chants. So the first one is the 5 subjects for frequent recollection on page 7. And this is it really is a teaching chant about the nature of our existence, but just being aware that this can touch very deeply, and especially potentially at this time. So taking care with your own heart, how much you want to engage with it, like finding your space, finding your ground, finding what feels helpful for you. And I'm going to say more about this reflection during the teaching, so that's partly why I'm bringing it in. So, 5 subjects for frequent recollection on page 7. I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And then we could also recollect the truth of our boundless heart, so page 8. The 4 boundless qualities, which is a contemplation of loving kindness, compassion, gladness or sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So qualities of heart that can really help to hold us also, us and all beings. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with compassion, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with gladness, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with equanimity. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. So invoking the heart of that which is awake within us, that which is listening. Invoking our capacity also to reflect and to connect in community, these three refuges. And through the chanting, also bringing attention to our shared vulnerability in this life. Deep connectedness. As well as the boundless potential of our heart. And just in the simple recollection through the chanting, we can be reminding ourselves, bringing ourselves back in touch. These potentials within. And we can also do this with a deep kindness and presence to our embodied being here and now. How is it to, to gather here in our mind, in our body? And bring a listening into how we are now. Without judging or stretching or trying, just allowing ourselves to arrive. And as we do that, seeing if it's helpful to feel the touch of the earth under our body. physical weight of our body as it invites us to slow down and settle, connect. And the breath. And just really seeing what's happening for us right now. Without judgment, without measuring. Maybe it's difficult even to come into our body, and we can just feel maybe the touch of the air on our skin. Or the warmth somewhere. Deep kindness. We can attune in a real way, in a genuine way. What we're sensing here. Maybe turning our attention to what might bring us some resource. Do we need to remember the touch of the earth? Or the sense of space around our body? That is receiving us. Do we need to notice that we have a capacity for listening within? An awareness that can receive and hold and care. And invoke some support from the elements, or a sense of that which is awake, that which is listening. From a sense of our ancestors. We sense that. Taking time to honor that which we wish to honor and resource. Noticing this movement isn't, it's not so separate. It's like the in-breath and the out-breath. We honor and we resource. The same cycle. And giving ourselves time for this. To seeing how our listening might soften or deepen, or be able to hold differently our experience. When we're more connected, more resourced. Somehow more true in our being in this way. As we loosen the grip of the sense of separate, watertight being. We'll end the meditation in a minute or so, and just seeing what you want to continue to attune to and bring with you. Remember to attend. Thank you. I know many of you were at Tanisra's session last week, which was a really powerful Sangha meeting. And I just want to really, acknowledge the there isn't a word for it. It's not difficult times. It's like it's the extreme harmfulness of the times that we are living in. So I'm not based in the US, I'm based in France, but even over here, I'm feeling the ripples, more than ripples. And Of course, before that, there's been the ongoing genocide in Gaza, there's the climate, there's all these different things that are now hitting strong and fast. And so we did draw together from last week's session, we've drawn together a resources sheet that we will share. And at the end of this session, I want to share the little section that reflection that Tanisra gave on, it was something around like what is our deepest prayer and what is true power, false power. There were so many things that were touching on this theme of true and false. And I've been contemplating a lot the theme of truthfulness recently as well. So I wanted to say a bit more of that, of some of my reflections on that. And if any of it's helpful, then please take it with you. And if not, of course, just let it go. And there'll be a time for questions or discussion at the end. So, yeah, truthfulness or integrity. It does feel like with so much of what's happening at the moment, one can feel like so powerless. And there's something about in all the movements of conditions, the capacity to hold one's integrity and truthfulness and to keep reflecting, and so that we have the best chance we can of responsiveness, that feels very important then in feeding our engagement or our actions in the external world, and also in not losing somehow our integrity or power within forces that can really overwhelm us. So and on the send out this week, I put another quote by Hannah Arendt that was basically, it's basically that thing of like, when we're so fed with so many versions of misinformation, we just lose capacity to believe or to reflect, and then we become limp and unable to respond. And I think that's a very real predicament at the moment. So this sense of being able to find enough space to come back to our own listening and truthfulness feels very important. So obviously, when we chanted the precepts, there's the precept around, right speech, which is touching on truthfulness. And that's like an ethical guideline, an ethical sensitivity. And in the translation that we had, it's to refrain from speech that is false, divisive, harsh, or meaningless. And there's even in this, it's like there's something about we're being aware of staying true, of staying integrated with our perception of something. So if we're perceiving in a certain way, then we share that in a truthful way. And there's something about the connection between our speech and the rest of our being. So already it's like, okay, come into connection. Don't just speak emptiness. And also, how are we using our energy? So when we're overwhelmed, of course, it's so much easier to turn away or to distract, and of course we need to resource. That's very, very important. And sometimes taking our attention away is very important to something more settled, something more grounding, something more connected, something more uplifting. But if we're just distracting in a habitual way, then there's a question, how are we using our energy? Is this actually helpful? So even in that very simple precept, there's this reflection, and also the reflection of the effect of our speech. So is it divisive? And this asks actually for quite a deep reflection that I want to say more about. So when Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about the precept of truthfulness, he talks about it as being an alignment with wisdom, actually, because he talks about we're choosing to take our stand on reality rather than illusion, which already that's a pretty big it's a pretty big direction to look in. And then we have to find our way of like actually getting there. How am I actually bringing my truthfulness through my being? How am I reflecting? And this is what I want to say more about. So, because it seems to me that with the quality of truthfulness, or what I'm feeling as integrity, there is a quality, there are two core aspects. One is a quality of being willing to cut through delusions, greed, hatred, delusion, and it's willing to keep going in that. We keep unpeeling the layers, which is a quality that I feel is like really, really needed right now. It's been needed for a long time, and it's like really needed. So there's a quality of cutting through, and this quality of encouraging, keep going, keep cutting through the layers, keep being willing. So encouraging, as you know, I live in France, and in encouraging, there's cœur, there's heart, bringing heart to our keeping going, that it's so easy to lose touch with in the overwhelm of what's happening to us. So I think this is really important, because this quality of cutting through and keeping heart, keeping connecting, keeping caring, I think this is something like primordial in the Buddhist teaching. So when I look at even the most basic Buddhist teachings, so that chant we did, the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, the 4 noble truths, say, also the teachings on the first arrow and the second arrow, what suffering do we add? There's a certain level of suffering that comes through our mortal existence. And I'm not meaning that in a negative sense. It's, we're born into this amazing body with this amazing earth, and it is impermanent, it's fragile, it's vulnerable. And so the inherent in that there is that we will age, we will get sick, we'll die, things will change, so we will lose things. And the Buddha asks us to look, he asks us to be truthful about that. And he also, and this is very important for me, he asks us to see what we're doing with it in ways that cause harm for ourselves, for others, or for both, or not. So, you know, I mean, it's a very simplistic kind of way of putting it, but there's something about the whole energy of capitalism and objectifying each other, dominating the earth, dominating each other, taking away each other's rights. It's like that is so far away from this vision of interconnectedness and reflectiveness on, are we causing harm or not? And I feel like actually in the Buddhist teaching over all this time, there's been this reflection, and it is so pertinent now. So last week, you know, Philip was saying also, you know, the vision of collective liberation, that it's including all humans, it's including the earth, it's including the animals. Can we extend our heart like this? Which is clearly very different to, I mean, I'm not laughing actually, but it's clearly extremely different to what is happening in our current political climates. And I read a beautiful reflection on right action recently that was so simple. It was just talking about action that acknowledges our interdependence. So solidarity, allyship, taking care with this earth, taking care with each other, taking care of the vulnerable in our communities, being aware of our own privilege. All of this can be held and unpacked within that. And even in the very early teachings, truthfulness is really upheld as something very important. So of the paramitas, or the parami, these qualities that the Buddha is said to have developed over lifetimes, like generosity, ethics, etc., truthfulness is the one that he's said to have developed consistently. That it's almost like this is the one that it underpins, because it's our capacity to listen truly, to respond truly. So I'm going to say a bit more about that. It's a very deep anchor and a reflective mirror. And it can be slippery to talk about, because obviously truth is multifaceted, it's individual, there's both and, it keeps changing, it's connected with the unknown, You know, one of the truths that I really love contemplating is that we can't know everything. You know, it's like that if we're going to grow, there has to be mystery, you know, there's a paradox, you know. And yet it's an energy towards a very deep alignment that acts as a very powerful ongoing mirror for our unfolding and for, I think, the well-being of our own being and this world. So there's a quote on truthfulness from the early teachings that says, now notice the paradox here, notice the language, his release, so we're just not, it's paradox. His release, being founded on truth, does not fluctuate, for whatever is deceptive is false. Unbinding the undeceptive is true. So there's something about like this alignment towards the undeceptive, towards that which is not binding us in greed, hatred, and delusion, that can sound very theoretical. And actually, I think it's really not. I think it comes back to a very real questioning moment by moment within one's own being about how one is perceiving and responding in our life. And very interestingly, in the teachings, truth is also a verb. It's not a thing. It's not a place that we're going to get to. It's a thing that we're continuously realizing, developing, understanding. And this is asking actually for our active involvement. So it's not like we're just sitting here and we're going to receive the truth. You know, maybe we do need to be resting, maybe we do need to be resourcing, but we also need to be reflecting. And this is where in our current climate, you know, that quote by Hannah Arendt, where she's saying, actually, we're losing our capacity because we're so overwhelmed. I mean, she's talking clearly about other fascist eras, but it's, we're so overwhelmed that we lose that capacity. And this teaching is inviting us, resource, nourish, keep it shining, keep it going, your capacity to reflect, to respond, what is needed for that, both to encourage it and to resource it. So I want to give another bit of a quote from Hannah Arendt that I find really, really important. So she says, the result of a consistent and total substitution of lies for factual truth is not that the lie will now be accepted as truth and truth be defamed as lie, but that the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world is being destroyed. So I find this very powerful, that by the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world. And this is partly why I wanted to talk about this, because I think the Buddha was really, really giving us some tools to keep our bearings when everything's going heads up, you know. It's like he says, come back to the shared truths of our existence, those 5 subjects for frequent recollection. Come back to we're all vulnerable to old age, sickness, death. Reflect on that interconnectivity and be aware of what we do with this. So with mind states, he says, hold it. So that lovely quote by Tanisra last week, which was like, receive what is arising. It was a quote by Ajahn Chah, receive what is arising and know that which is causing affliction or that which is not. So again, can sound like a really theoretical pointer, but it's a way of taking our bearings. Notice the truth of our interconnectedness. Notice the truth that we have the space of listening to receive what is happening within us. What's needed? Do we need to take care? Do we need to resource? Do we need to bring some more energy? Do we need, and how do we hold that which is harmful? And how do we nourish that which is wanting to create well-being? And all of this can be underneath then how we engage and act in the world. And it's for me, it's a kind of power and a commitment that can help us to keep our bearings. So, and there are so many aspects to this, so I'll just say a few of them. So when Thanissaro Bhikkhu talks about truthfulness in his book on the Parami, he talks about it again in these active senses, and he says truth can be seen as something that we perceive. And so when we're having truthful speech, say it's that we have a perception and we share that truthfully. And he says then there's an element of getting more and more refined in our inner perception around what feels truthful within us, what feels aligned. So for me, say, for instance, I've had a lot of experiences of like very strong disconnection in my body. And for a long time, I felt like that's who I was, And then it's like, well, actually, is that what is most true about my being? And very slowly, it's like, oh no, actually, there's something that can stay for a second with the earth, or that can. So that's just like, it's just a personal example, but there's something in us that knows we are much more connected. And that sometimes is afraid of that. And truthfulness, the truthfulness, being true in how we're perceiving, helps us to keep deepening down through those layers, to keep finding our resource, and then to keep holding that which is arising more skillfully. So yeah, truthfulness in how we're perceiving. And also within that, there's the deep importance of resourcing, because we might notice when we are deeply fearful, and that may be very justified at this time, what happens then, how with certain mind states, then that fear can kind of escalate, and we get carried off, and then we start doing things that are maybe not for our well-being or the well-being of others. And that doesn't mean that what is causing the fear doesn't need a response, but how do we resource in order to be able to hold it in a way that we can actually respond more skillfully? So there's something around this that is also very important. And in this as well, there's our deepening and growth. So we're not just holding on to comfort, So for those of us who are in a more privileged position, maybe sometimes actually a bit safer within society, it's like sometimes it can be like, oh, we don't want to deepen because we don't want to deepen underneath our privilege. And there's something about this truthfulness of perception of our interconnectedness that can also help us to deepen there with questioning, with work that needs to happen. And then another aspect of this truthfulness is truth maybe as something we tell. So this is something Thanissaro Bhikkhu touches on as well. And what I wanted to highlight here is as we hold our integrity, and of course we have to be alert to the situation we're in, is it the right time? Is it is it actually going to be heard? We have to be aware of the context we're in. But fundamentally holding one's integrity, the Buddha says about sharing that, he's like, when we don't do that, there's a harmfulness to our own being. So he tells this story of Rahula, his son, and he's like, if you are being dishonest or not looking in some way, actually it's like your own goodness is dropping away, drop by drop, So there's something about really being aware of our interconnectedness to the point that it's like, actually, my integrity is an important part of this in upholding well-being for the whole and for my own heart. It's not so separate somehow. And so sometimes we act in ways in which there's remorse, and there's sometimes it's good to look into that. I had a situation recently where I really wanted to share something, and then basically I chickened out, and I didn't feel good afterwards. It didn't feel good. It's like, well, how do I make reparation? So we're calling ourselves up in that way. And in this way, we're guarding truth. It's like there's this mirroring back into ourselves and the importance of integrity as this power that we have to hold alignment. And then I do think in our current world, with truth as being something that we guard, I think there's something about being willing to look in the places that are uncomfortable also. Tanisara mentioned last week, being aware of the most vulnerable in our communities, or for me, for a long time, I've been aware of the climate crisis. And then there was something that happened with Gaza. When Gaza happened, the genocide in Gaza kind of kicked up more. It's very, very painful to look there. And many people don't want to look there, but there's something about being willing to look in the places where we feel uncomfortable and to do our work there, that we're part of guarding truth. And I think in our current times, this is really, really, really important. So at the end, I will share those reflections from Tanisara as well, where there are kind of kernels for all of this, and it includes being aware of the most vulnerable in our communities, connecting out. How can we be in our integrity, sensing into our interconnectedness, sensing into our shared vulnerability, and sensing into that question of, like, very simple, how am I responding in a way that is adding to well-being or to harm? It's like, so obviously this is getting simplified down, but there's something around this kernel that I feel is very important. And that it's also to do with our own deep alignment, because as we're doing this work, we're actually deepening more and more into the truth of our shared being. And we're liberating from the forces of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so this is the last aspect of truth that Tanisara talks about, which is truth as something we awaken to, which then sounds like it's something very far away. And actually, part of what I love about these teachings is what if it's step by step in how we are coming into our alignment and coming into our integrity, coming into how we're responding in the world. And in that, we are awakening actually to what is possible within us that is not caught in greed, hatred, and delusion. And that this, so just to come back, this is a way by which we take our bearings in this world. So with so much misinformation, or with so much trauma, or with so much, people have named many different emotions in relation to this. It's like it can be fear, overwhelm, disgust, that we need to be able to open to the whole range. And we also, for me, I need to be able to find a sense of where is my heart and how do I need to resource and what can I respond with then. So this is taking our bearings again. It's refusing refusing to concede to those forces. And it's actually actively regenerating something else within our own being and within the larger being that we're part of. And this is why I put that quote also from Robin Wall Kimmerer at the end of the newsletter, because I feel it's very pertinent, that we don't lose the sense of what do we wish to honor, what do we wish to cultivate, what is the effect of that. So she says, we need acts of restoration, not only for polluted waters and degraded lands, but also for our relationship to the world. We need to restore honor to the way we live, so that when we walk through the world, we don't have to avert our eyes with shame, so that we can hold our heads up high and receive the respectful acknowledgement of the rest of the earth's beings. So that's in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And it seems so far from the reality that many of us are living right now. And it also feels really important to put it back into the heart of the possible, and that somehow this nourishment of integrity and being careful with that as we navigate the world, it really is a power, I think. So I'll end by reading, and I'll put in the chat as well, those reflections that Tanisra gave last week, which were a mix of these very internal things and more external engagement. And I think they're very, very pertinent. So Tanisra said, what is the depth of your prayer that guides your destiny? What is true and what is false power? How do you feel the difference internally and see it externally? What do you need to do to build resources, resilience, refuge? Take time to write what we are fighting for as humans, including our values. Who and what communities are the most vulnerable? Find out how you can help and support them. Explore reaching out beyond our silos to like-minded local and online communities, faith groups to connect and join forces with. What can you give up or renounce to strengthen yourself? Heighten your focus on the inner. What does it mean to stay true to your values? What is yours to do? How can you support true democracy? Explore empowering your authentic voice. Don't wait for others, always to lead or speak out. What are the opportunities presented in this situation? And who or what organizations are emerging as part of the resistance? Find some you can learn from, engage with, and support. So I'll put that in the chat as well, if I can get Zoom to comply. And let me just take a moment to do that. So I'll end there, and yeah, I hope there were some things that were in there that were helpful. And anyone who wants to stay on for discussion or for questions, you can stay. You're welcome to stay. And anyone who needs to leave, you're welcome to leave. And just before you do, I'll put the Dharma link if you'd like to support Sacred Mountain Sangha. There's, it's not doing it. Okay, so it's not doing it. So if you want to support Sacred Mountain Sangha with Dharma, then please go to the website, and there's also the upcoming programs there. So thank you for your presence, for your listening, for your practice. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, then please.